They're two of the strongest competitions in the world, but now Netball New Zealand has approached Australia's governing body with a proposal for a Trans-Tasman League. Jaegers captain Jane Altschwager believes Aussie teams can compete physically, but not financially.
They've got an extremely good competition running over there where they're paying players up to $45,000 a year. So that's something that's unheard of in Australian netball.
The proposal provides for two options, a fully fledged Trans-Tasman League or a playoff series between the top sides at the end of both national seasons. A combined competition could see teams cut in both countries, leading to an uncertain future.
I would think with no doubts in the next couple of years we could grow strong enough to compete, but that would really be, the final decision would be up to the governing bodies.
The Jaegers captain believes the playoff system is the healthy option.
That would generate certainly some publicity and hopefully some sponsorship, and then maybe lead on to combined competition. But for the moment I don't think it's feasible.
To season 2006, and the Jaegers travel to the ACT this weekend to take on the winless Canberra Darters.
The motivation is most definitely there. We're hoping to finish with 2 wins, and which will consolidate a bit of the good work we've done the last month.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. With the fight for semi-final places heating up, the clash between 3rd and 4th was always going to be fiery. Carlton was the first to lose a player to the bin. Minutes later, this hit by Mark Torfua earned a similar fate. But the referee wasn't finished. Captain Lolo Mohu's departure reduced the Waratahs to 13. Green's kicker Luke Commode converted the penalty for the first points, but Merriweather failed to take advantage of the extra man. After the break, the home side found itself deep in enemy territory as Chris Mikulski strolled over for the Waratahs. Mistakes in the line-out cost the Greens possession before Daniel Marshall found plenty of room out wide to score the home side's second. A late penalty to top point scorer Ben Peterson capped off a bad night with the boot, but a good night for the Tars. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
He's on a plane from Manchester as we speak, arriving in on Saturday morning, and of course if he feels good we'll rush him into the side, but we'll play it by ear.
"80-year-old Ralph Brunskill lost his sight 30 years ago, but in recent years, learning to sail has changed his life.
Oh, for people like us, anybody to get us on water is unbelievable because it's something we're not supposed to do.
Ralph has taken on 15-year-old Jessie Strickland as his student. Jessie is also blind, but has discovered new horizons thanks to Ralph and this small dinghy.
It makes you feel relaxed. That I do go to sleep in the sailing boat.
The pair sail with the help of volunteers at Sailability on Lake Macquarie, who have fitted a small bell to Ralph's sail, which rings when the sail isn't catching the wind properly. And the pair is guided around the course with the help of two-way radio.
It's been a new experience for me because it's a reverse role. They're always teaching me. And this time I've got to relay that, what they've taught me, onto Jessie, yeah.
The partnership has brought much joy to both Ralph and Jessie, but soon Jessie will be charting her own course.
She's always relying on me to do that, but the day's going to come, and it's going to come shortly, that she's going to go on her own.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It's been more than 2 years since Barbara Cheadle and her granddaughters Rebecca and Jessica Campbell were killed when the vehicle they were travelling in collided head-on with a prime mover near Bulahdelah after the truck crossed to the wrong side of the Pacific Highway. Today, the girls' mother, father and grandfather read personally written victim impact statements to the court, their mother highlighting the things she misses most.
Taking them to school in the morning, like I said, sitting at work at 3 o'clock when you should be sitting on the bench outside their classroom. So it's just unfair.
For the girls' father, time has done little to ease the loss.
When it comes to victims, it's not just Kath and I either too, you know, it's there's lots of police, ambulance people, the helicopter guys, the public. There's 500 kids at a school, all mums, friends, you know, like, you talk about our victim impact statements, it's just a snippet, you know.
Morabito broke down while listening to the statements, crying silently when his daughter Jenny told the court of how he's told his family he would swap places with the victims if he could. Morabito was granted conditional bail and will reappear for sentencing on the 6th of September. His defence today urged Judge Coulihan to consider a non-custodial sentence.
He needs to be accountable for that, for his actions.
That's enough for us, I think.
Yeah, you know, like
we're
it's
ambivalent. Otherwise, we just.
Yeah, for sure. We don't need to see this guy rot in jail. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what it's about.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The public transport system on the southern fringes of Lake Macquarie just doesn't cut it, was the message coming from locals at a transport forum in Morisset this morning.
No, it's not adequate. It needs to be improved. As part of the government's bus reforms, we've just signed a new bus contract with the Toronto Bus Company and the Morisset Bus Company.
With more and more people moving into the area, the need for an improved integrated transport system is being felt more than ever before. Locals say bus companies need to adjust their routes and timetables to better serve the community.
There's about 3,000 new houses being built, and a lot of those fathers still work in Sydney. They want to catch that 7 o'clock train to Sydney, and unfortunately the buses don't start till 7:30.
What's more, bus services finish at 6 p.m, meaning that commuters either have to be picked up or catch taxis home. School students say they're also fed up with the lack of buses.
We live about 5 minutes down the road and it takes us an hour to get there because of the transport.
The concerns raised at the meeting will be taken to the Transport Ministry. Madeline Bond, NBN News. While the Pasminco lead smelter in Boolaroo was demolished earlier this year, health workers are still concerned over the danger of lead poisoning in the area, particularly to young children.
I think the important thing to recognise is that some of the lead dust, of course, still remains in the soil, and there's ongoing risk for people who are renovating old houses where there's lead paint. So maybe some of the risks have changed, but still the message is very pertinent.
According to Dr. Durheim, many new families have moved into the area and may be unaware of its history and the risk of lead poisoning. For that reason, a community-based DVD has been produced and was today released.
This resource has been created to help you understand lead poisoning and how it could affect your children.
Each chapter of the film describes how homeowners can make their house and garden lead safe.
One of them is home renovation, particularly lead paint, and how to safely renovate your house.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Nathan Cavalieri knows firsthand the struggle of battling a genetic disorder, having been diagnosed with childhood leukemia at the age of 7. Already a supporter of Genes for Genes Day, which raises money for the Children's Medical Research Institute, the well-known guitarist has gone a step further to help raise funds by promoting Jamming for Genes Day.
All the bands, I think, nationwide are getting together on this particular night and are basically rocking it out to raise money for it instead of just the auctioning of the genes.
Much of the money raised will go towards research being carried out right here in the Hunter.
Supplying funds towards some salaries for PhD students, and the second is actually supplying funds towards major pieces of equipment that we otherwise would have a great deal of difficulty accessing.
The funds raised have helped researchers make inroads into developing drugs to stop epilepsy.
One of the things we're desperately trying to do is to make sure that the discoveries we're making in this area within Australia can be developed within Australia. and can be taken to the next level. We'd like to develop the drugs in Australia. We'd like to take them through clinical trials in Australia.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The Broncos have lost their last 3 games in a row since the Origin series has finished. Now, their coach Wayne Bennett has denied they're in a form slump, and I agree that 3 losses doesn't mean your team's in a slump. However, if we look back over the stats for the last 5 years and see how the Broncos have fared in their run home after an Origin series is complete, it tells me they're about to be in one. Now, obviously, stats don't always give a true indication of the situation, but in this case, I think it's pretty well undeniable. Now, after winning the comp in year 2000, the Broncos have developed a deeply rooted habit of falling apart at this stage of the season. In 2001, after the 3rd Origin game had finished, they'd won only 2 from their last 10 games. 2002, 2 from 7. 2003, they didn't win a game in their last 8. 2004, only 1 from their last 6. And then last year, after they finished the Origin series, they didn't win 1 game of their last 7. 2006 this year, they're none from 3, and that's an active total of only 5 wins in their last 41 games. Now, that's an amazing stat for a team that has so much player talent and club resources at its disposal not to work out a strategy to counteract this perennial problem. On to round 22, a traditional clash between the Eels and the Dragons. The Dragons will be without Mark Gasnier, but I'm tipping them to win away from home. 3 games Saturday. I like the Sharks, Storm and the Bulldogs, and on Sunday, Raiders in an upset, Knights and the Panthers. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Mariners officials won't reveal how much the 2-year deal is worth, only to say it's priceless. First helping to get the Socceroos into the World Cup, only to be ruled out of the finals with a heart condition, Tony Wittmar has since recovered, ending a 12-year career in Europe to play for the Central Coast.
Spoke to a few people about the club and about the area, so they're all been positive about it. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to come back home. I'll come back to Australia.
In the NBN Soccer League, all matches are scheduled for Sunday, with Broadmeadow and Phoenix fighting for outright third in the race to the finals. Wanderers and University remain in the minor premiership hunt in local rugby. Both host their respective matches, while the Waratahs are on the road. And the season proper finishes up this weekend in Newcastle Rugby League, with plenty to play for at Raymond Terrace. Should Lakes beat the Magpies, it'll firm up their minor premiership chances and quite possibly end the Terrace's run. Wests and Cessnock also need results to fall their way if they are to feature in the final 5. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. It's one of Newcastle's most tranquil settings. The mood this morning, though, was anything but serene. Such is the nature of cross-country mountain bike riding. Glenrock a perfect training base for the hunters Adam Freeman and Wayne Bauer. Entered as a team in the Working Week series, each race goes for 8 hours, and when one rider needs a breather, the other comes on.
So we come into a transition, tag each teammate, and they go off, and then you go back to our basic little base camp and rest.
A work-rest ratio the pair have nearly perfected. As such, they are second overall going into the final event in Canberra on Sunday. Not bad for their first attempt as a team.
The guys that have been winning the races are very highly ranked riders and international riders actually. They've competed overseas in Commonwealth Games.
Is there any way you can win this weekend, take out the whole series?
Possibly if they don't turn up.
Both are using the series and each other to achieve different goals. For 33-year-old Wayne, a World Masters campaign beckons, while at 25, Adam is on the path to becoming a professional. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Last year, horses cantered along the Morpeth Medicine charity ride in a cloud of dust, but today it was mud the horses' hooves were flicking up. That's if mounting proved not to be too slippery a task. Despite the heavy morning downpours, the riders were all too happy to bear sogginess in the saddle for the very worthy cause, raising money for kids with cancer and disabilities.
We've got some really enthusiastic riders, that's why you can't stop riding. Who cares about the weather? We're into it today.
While dry as a bones kept more than one rider dry during the downpour, others waited it out. Riders with disabilities among the hundreds who took to the saddle.
We've gone out of our way this year to really get the support from the community, and the riders just love this type of atmosphere. And as you can see by today, the number we've got in and the weather, it's unbelievable. So that's where the support comes from, is the people.
And the riders, as well as the corporate sponsors, have certainly dug deep. This year's event set to reap almost $25,000. Some riders also secured private sponsorship, raising around $2,000 for the 20-kilometre trek.
And we've been running for about 14 years now, and our two beneficiaries for the ride, one is the John Hunter Children's Paediatric Oncology Unit, and the second one's RDA, riding for the disabled at Raymond Terrace.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
There have been injury clouds all over the Knights this week, but there is a silver lining for Chris Bailey anyway. Promoted from Premier League, he'll start at 5/8 tomorrow afternoon.
I guess starting is a bit different to coming off the bench, but I mean he's pretty experienced. I mean he's 24, 25, and he's spent plenty of time with us in pre-season and also this week, so I'm sure he'll handle it okay.
Jared Mullen, Todd Lowry and Kirk Reynoldson have been ruled out after all three copped injuries in last week's win over the Sharks. Their absence has made room on the bench for Riley Brown and Daniel Abraham, clearly with the captain's approval. And another milestone for Andrew Johns tomorrow, celebrating his 100th game as skipper on what's expected to be a wet Gosford pitch.
1,142 drivers or 37 motorists per day were booked for speeding in Newcastle's CBD during July.
Those figures are disappointing, significant numbers as I said. However, a pleasing aspect of it is it tells us that we are deploying our resources, our highway patrol and other resources in the right areas.
The results were obtained during a camera car operation in the Newcastle area. Police say it's particularly worrying that people are continuing to drive at high speeds in suburban areas, despite recent road operations and safety campaigns.
That message that is getting out there is being ignored.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
On a bitterly cold Tamworth night, the Jets were short on numbers, forced to call up an ill Matt Thompson. But there was nothing crook about his game, setting up Jade North early, who proved just the tonic. The Jets held out until just before the break when Melbourne's Archie Thompson equalised. A Newcastle handball gave victory a shot and skipper Kevin Muscat put the Victorians in front. Another penalty, this time in Newcastle's favour, saw Nick Carl lock the game up. A draw loomed until the 84th minute when Melbourne's Daniel Allsop was given room to go one-on-one with Jets goalkeeper Ben Kennedy, ending Newcastle's pre-season cup run.
We've conceded 6 goals so far during the cup campaign and in the 4 games, and 5 of them have been very poor mistakes from our side.
One of those assets is Blackbutt Reserve at New Lambton. The nature reserve and fauna park attracts thousands of local and international visitors and costs $800,000 a year to maintain. Operated by Newcastle Council since the 1960s, Blackbutt is home to 50 different species of animals, 240 of those in enclosures. But the world-class display and its 10 staff are on a hit list of possible cost-cutting measures. 2 baby koalas are the latest additions to Blackbutt, but some fear the park will face cuts when the General Manager's report is handed down this week.
We need to all work together, the community and council, to look at sort of the future of Blackbutt and sort of what it can offer the visitors of Newcastle.
Meantime, bureaucratic time wasting has allowed one of the city's other top tourist attractions to further deteriorate. The federal government is supposed to have spent $5 million by now and handed the historic fort over to Newcastle Council. But it's believed a squabble between the council and the government on what work should be done is delaying the process. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
When it comes to helping sports achieve ground and infrastructure goals, Lake Macquarie Council has opted for the level playing field. The 3-tiered individual player charge of between $20 and $50, introduced on July 1, determined by quality of venue and grade of sport played, is far from an own goal for Council's coffers.
So each facility has an operating committee that collects that money and that also then decides and directs what happens with that money.
The fee structure was developed during 2 years of discussion with the city's sporting organisations and more recently 6 months of public consultation on the price.
Rather than any club, no matter their size, paying the same fee for use of facilities, that we're actually now charging per head, and therefore it's a more equitable structure across the board.
Local Government Minister Kerry Hickey says his only issue with the individual player charge is that it is fair and does not disadvantage families. And Lake Macquarie Council is under pressure to provide more sporting facilities. Councillors are tonight considering whether to turn these tennis courts at Belmont North over to netball, with the local association, which is one of 3 in the city, having almost 1,700 players. Gary Blair, NBN News.
The as yet unnamed group of drugs could revolutionise the way doctors treat skin cancer, according to Mater Hospital senior staff specialist Peter Hersey. 280 people have taken part in a 12-month-long international study which monitored the impact the drugs had on cancer cells during melanoma treatments.
So with these new drugs, we are using them with the idea that we'll make the cancer cells then more sensitive to chemotherapy or immunotherapy.
He says the trial has yielded some promising preliminary results.
So certainly looking very hopeful, and I think I can also say that most of the investigators involved in this trial have been fairly impressed. But we do have to wait until we get the results.
Which should be within the next 5 months. Meanwhile, trials into the long-term and post-operative effects of breast cancer were today given a $16,000 boost by Newcastle's 1-to-1 committee.
Will help us to find new follow-up programs for these women to enable them to have the longest and the healthiest survival long-term.
Trials begin in the Hunter later this year, with plans to take the study worldwide. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Last year, 450 families from throughout New South Wales took advantage of the subsidised accommodation at Ronald McDonald House. This year there'll be even more, among them the Brinkman family from Bonny Hills near Port Macquarie. Their world was turned upside down 7 weeks ago when 17-year-old Hannah suffered a brain aneurysm.
One day everything was normal and then suddenly you're in a helicopter on your way to life-saving surgery.
They left their home at a moment's notice and have spent the last 5 weeks at the house.
I left home, travelling to Port Macquarie, following the ambulance, thinking that we were going to come home, and then we flew from there down to here in the helicopter. So, it was pretty quick.
6 new units were opened in January and already demand is outstripping supply.
We didn't think the units were going to be filled as much as they are, and as happens, we've opened them up and filled them immediately. We've even got 2 or 3 families on a wait list regularly, so it's a bit of a surprise for us, and we certainly need more units again, I guess.
It's hoped Hannah will make a full recovery. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The carcass was first spotted by lifeguards in the surf zone off Merriweather Beach early this afternoon. It didn't take long before the 10-metre-long giant washed up further north at Dixon Park, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers.
Well, it's pretty incredible. It's quite big and it's not something you normally see on the beach, that's for sure.
Yeah, I haven't seen nothing like this before, yeah. He's in a bad way too. Looks like it's been chomped on though. First time I've ever seen a whale as well.
It's not known how the whale died or whether or not the large gashes along its back, possibly caused by a ship's propeller, were inflicted before or after its death.
It's been dead for quite a while and shows signs of deterioration as well as attacked by sharks.
Just what will be done with the carcass remains to be seen.
With smaller marine life, as with seaweed on the beach, we attempt to dispose of that on site by deep burying. Certainly we'll have a look at options here, whether or not we need to actually remove the carcass from the beach.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Brands Hatch, England, one of the most popular courses on the tour. Just ask the 130,000 people to make the pilgrimage. Staring down the barrel of the World Championship crown, Tari's Troy Bayliss was happy to play second fiddle. That was until lap 4. Japan's Noriyuki Haga was never far away. The lead exchanged before the Aussie was back in front after 10. 4 laps later, it was a tight tussle for position. Bayliss put it all behind him, though, to build a big buffer. Bayliss held his lead until the end to take the first event. Race 2 started like the first, with Bayliss and Haga playing cat and mouse. But sitting in third place, it was Carl Muggeridge from Tweed Heads who got caught in the trap. The series leader almost came unstuck too. And that's how it finished. Noriyuki Haga got one back on Bayliss, with fellow Aussie Andrew Pitt rounding out the minors. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. The Knights had a spring in their step today, now enjoying life in the top 4, but they realised they could just as soon go backwards.
It's so close to competition at the moment. I mean, we're just there on for and against at the moment, so the next few games are really important.
Games Chris Bailey would very much like to be a part of.
In reality, you know, that Kurt and Jared have got to come back, and I think they're in front of me. So, you know, I'd be happy to get a spot on the bench or something like that. But you know, I'll just take what I can get.
The stand-in pivot was a standout during the Knights' 14-point win over the Roosters yesterday, pushing his case for more time in the top grade. His first top-grade try was followed by Luke DeVico's in what was his first 4-pointer in Newcastle colours. And the bench made quite an impact, with Riley Brown adding to the Knights' margin, but did suffer a hand injury with ligament damage. As for the game returning to Gosford, over 18,000 people filled the stadium. Hardly a thriller, but clearly a hair-raiser. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. Starting from pole, Brock Parks was first out of the grid and before too long had a half-second lead over his rivals that only grew. But the real battle was for second and third, teammate Kevin Curtin in pursuit before pushing past series leader Sebastian Charpentier. But there was more to come. Curtin then had second in his sights. From there, the Hunter Valley team kept its position, with Parks winning his first event of the season.
If I ever thought like 3 years ago to win in Brands Hatch, it was never in my mind.
To the human-powered variety of bike, and the Hunter pairing of Wayne Bauer and Adam Freeman have won the final round of the Working Week Mountain Bike Series in Canberra. Seen here training, the pair finished second overall in the Open Division. It was a Hunter double, with Scott McDermott and Dean McGay winning the Masters. Back to golf, and despite firing a final round 68, Toronto's Nathan Green finished 15 shots behind Tiger Woods at the Buick Open. And on the nationwide tour in Nebraska, Belmont's Nick Flanagan finished at 12 under. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
It was a brutal attack sparked by a relationship breakup on Valentine's Day 2005. In Crown Facts tendered to Newcastle District Court, Judge Ralph Coulihan was told Stephen Glenn Campton went to the caravan at Cessnock Showground on February 24 last year to confront his former de facto for the 5th time in 10 days about leaving him. Campton produced a long-bladed knife and repeatedly stabbed a 59-year-old friend of the couple who owned the van, inflicting injuries say the woman was lucky to survive. He then turned on his 50-year-old former partner, stabbing her 3 times before fleeing the scene. In sentencing submissions, Defence Counsel for Campton, James Miller, argued psychiatric reports indicate there was some event of mental collapse. Something went catastrophically wrong with my client. But Crown Prosecutor Lee Carr countered, telling Judge Coulihan there seems to be a degree of planning. During today's hearing, Stephen Campton took to the witness stand and told the court he has no recollection of what happened at Cessnock Showground, nor can he explain where he got the knife that was used to attack the 2 women. He added, "I feel really sorry this has come down the way it has." Judge Coulihan reserved his decision on sentence and adjourned the case until August 23. Gary Blair, NBN News.
While the whale may now be out of sight, it's certainly not out of mind for Dixon Park locals who fear the decaying carcass could cause problems for beachgoers.
My concern is that the oil from the whale leaching into the water and us having a shark problem.
They don't seem to monitor the water to see if there's any bacteria or any contamination of the water from the carcass.
They say the carcass, which was put into a 2-metre deep beach grave, could be exposed by erosion and never should have been buried at the location.
I don't believe that they've got the jurisdiction to go and create a garbage tip right in our front yard.
I just feel like, again, the council has just taken the cheap option by burying it on a popular beach, and the whale really should have been chopped up and taken away to the dump.
However, the National Parks and Wildlife Service and Newcastle Council have defended their decision.
Well, it's standard procedure to bury on site where possible. It's very difficult for an animal this size to remove off the beach.
The National Parks and Wildlife Service removed the whale's jawbone early this morning. It will now be taken to Macquarie University in Sydney for scientific research. The carcass will remain buried until it's decomposed. The whale's bones will then be unearthed and studied. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
What's in a name? Well, if you ask Lake Macquarie City Council, plenty.
I think that there is often confusion with Newcastle, that Lake Macquarie is a suburb of Newcastle, and in fact we are our own city and a very large one at that.
It's not a case of sour grapes, rather mistaken identity. The council is seeking the public's feedback on a plan to trim Glendale, Cardiff and Argenton to form the suburb of Lake Macquarie.
The area that's been proposed in the report is at Glendale, around the commercial area, the industrial area, the sports centre, that area around there.
Making Lake Macquarie more than just a geographical feature will help the area get more recognition in map books and with road signage. But if you fancy your existing suburb name, don't despair. The proposed boundaries for the Swish new locality have a minimal impact on residential addresses. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Barrister Michael Bateman has been practising law for around 35 years. It's a highly stressful occupation with long hours and he often works weekends. But Michael's combating the work-related tension with a creative outlet.
Drawing and creative activities, especially painting, is something that I really enjoy and takes my mind off the stressful aspects of what I'm doing and takes me outside of myself.
In fact, he's quite an accomplished painter, one of several artists whose work is on exhibition at Newcastle's John Painter Gallery.
It takes you to somewhere where you can't think about anything else but what you're doing on the canvas.
The link between creativity and well-being is an area being studied at the University of Newcastle as part of their new Arts Health Research Centre. So far, studies have revealed that those who are engaged in cultural and artistic pursuits such as art or music are more likely to report better health than others.
I think everyone has to find their own creative outlet, and an area of interest for us is trying to get the government to realise that creative thinking is the way for the future.
The university is investing $250,000 over the next 3 years to merge science with art as researchers examine the relationship between creativity and health, including assessing the impact of art in healing and recuperation. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The win over the Roosters moved the Knights back into the top four, but more importantly, it also injected a healthy dose of self-belief.
We got off the bus and I remember asking Andrew, it sort of summed up how all the boys felt. I said, what's going on tonight, mate? A couple of beers? And he said, no, mate, I'm going home, we've got a premiership to win. So, it's pretty much a general feeling amongst all the boys.
Injuries have forced changes to the squad that won on the Central Coast on Sunday. Prop Craig Smith requires surgery on his jaw and will be out for 4 weeks, while Jared Mullen, Kirk Reynoldson and Kurt Gidley are all expected to return to the lineup. Coach Michael Hagan says Smith's influence will be tough to replace, putting more emphasis on the club's young forwards.
Without Smithy there, I think they've got to take on a bit more responsibility because he's such a good talker, talks to them during training, before games, probably during games.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. Back to the comforts of home after 2 gruelling weeks on the road for the Newcastle Jets. A 3-2 loss to Melbourne in Tamworth was good enough to earn the Jets a surprise place in the pre-season Cup semi-finals against the Central Coast. And while the Mariners welcomed a former Socceroo in Tony Vidmar to training for the first time, the Jets ran without some of their stars, on duty with the current Socceroo squad. Despite admitting the Cup was initially not a priority, coach Nick Theodorakopoulos says the club is building a squad that can claim the title.
We've got some more players coming back. We only had a skeleton staff on duty on Saturday night in Tamworth, and with the addition of Joel Griffiths, I think it increases our chances significantly.
The 4 Socceroos will return to Jets training this Friday, while Job Wheelhouse is expected to return from injury for the semi-final. And finally, some good news off the field, with meetings between the Jets and Newcastle Knights management about the use of Energy Australia Stadium proving successful. An agreement about tickets for the Jets' first home game has been reached, with discussions on the rest of the season set to continue.
It'll be
dealt with on a match-by-match basis until such times as all the negotiations are concluded.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
And they always want a few tips, to improve, and I think that's fantastic. And these kids are just the same.
These traffic lights on Newcastle Road, Jesmond, were installed to improve pedestrian safety. But on January 23, Bessie Myers was knocked down by a utility whose driver failed to stop for a red light, seriously injuring the 79-year-old. It was 4 days after the crash before police located the utility and interviewed the driver, Donald Coburn. The 52-year-old Jesmond man pleaded guilty in Newcastle local court to 4 charges over the crash, including failing to stop and render assistance to the victim and dangerous driving occasioning grievous bodily harm. In Coburn's defence, his solicitor today told the court that the Jesmond man did stop after the crash but failed to render assistance due to the hostility of the victim's husband. In submissions to Magistrate Wakely, Coburn's solicitor Phil Sharrock said his client had expressed remorse and contrition. It includes a handwritten apology, which is yet to be delivered to the victim and her husband. But in handing down sentence, Magistrate Richard Wakely found that Coburn's failure to report his involvement in the crash to police was an aggravating feature of the case. On the charge of failing to stop and render assistance, Mr Coburn was sentenced to 9 months jail. He also lost his driver's licence and was disqualified from driving for 4 years. Gary Blair, NBN News.
"15 years ago, this machine represented Jim Kelman's entire operation. Now, more than 7 million metres of fabric later, and in contrast to others in the industry, Mr Kelman's company, Wax Converters Textiles, has thrived and grown.
As we grew a bit further, I bought some more machines, or had them made if we couldn't buy them, and stepped out further and diversified.
With more than 30 years' experience, Mr Kelman admits luck has always been a factor in his success. But he's also learned valuable lessons from companies such as National Textiles, ensuring each of his 70 employees is multi-skilled.
The one who's freest by and large unloads the truck, and then within the buildings themselves there's probably 5 or 6 machines, they can all work those.
Along with production, the company is also in the business of innovation. The latest product, infrared fabrics for the Australian military, were developed in conjunction with the Department of Defence.
They asked us to do a confidentiality non-disclosure agreement with them, and in exchange for that they imparted the knowledge.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
There's also a win for the environment. The gas-fired power station will see a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
With a position like this and views to die for, it seems a logical decision to set up an alfresco cafe and kiosk overlooking Dixon Park Beach.
Once we get our lease in place, we're planning to have an open-style cafe, which will then take advantage of the view looking east from where we are and south towards Merewether.
Instead of modifying their old kiosk like other clubs have, Dixon Park wants to demolish this building, which is on Crown land, and redevelop the site to lease out the facility. But frustratingly for them, the plan has already been 5 years in the pipeline, held up by council red tape.
We're trying to get the club into a position of being self-sustaining, and this is making things very difficult. You know, it's just we haven't had a source of income from the kiosk for 4 or 5 years.
Some councillors have supported the proposal, but there are still some concerns from Newcastle City Council that the club is being too ambitious. The council today released a statement saying, "We're urging the club to be patient. The beach assets framework is being developed so that we can make the right decisions about how our beach assets are used." Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Meet 7M, Waratah Technology Campus's newest class. Made up of 20 students, the class is a girl-free zone. Teachers say after 4 weeks in the group, the boys are already performing better than they were in a mixed class. "7M was created as part of the school's Successful Boys program, which aims to help male students reach their potential.
We've known for a long time that boys struggle at school. They struggle because they do stupid things, they make poor choices. And what we're trying to do is to make links between the school, the home and the boys themselves.
Today, the school held its first Successful Boys extracurricular event, a bloke's big breakfast for students and their male role models.
With a positive role model, we find that the choices they make are better. They gives them somebody to look up to.
And it seems the boys were embracing the program.
All the girls have been working better than us, and this is a better way for the boys to get more education.
I think the school's had a great idea with it, yeah.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
A spectacular footballer in motion in Tamworth, and hence why a lot of people after the game came up to me and said what an outstanding display on a very difficult surface, mind you.
car itself's $400,000 worth. The transport you see behind me, that's around about $1 million all on the road. So it's a pretty expensive exercise.
Normally reserved for professional touring productions, Newcastle's Civic Theatre and its smaller venue, the Playhouse, are increasingly being hired for quality local shows. The Playhouse is booked solid till the end of next year with 80% local product.
I think the venue has had a big part in rekindling local production, and one of the really exciting things is seeing the box office being generated so that local producers are getting an income and are able to plan for the future.
Local productions of the hit musicals Oliver and Beauty and the Beast will be staged at the Civic soon, while The King and I will open at the end of the month at the university's Griffith Duncan Theatre. It'll be the 29th show, directed by local theatre stalwart Julie Black.
Newcastle has so much talent, and sometimes you think, really, there's not enough shows to accommodate all the talent in Newcastle. So it's a great time for everybody to go to the theatre and learn more about theatre. To me, it's the best medium.
Former New Zealander Des Robertson is playing the King of Siam.
It's an exciting time to be in theatre because there's so much opportunity and so many shows, like you say, being done, and great shows as well.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Police believe this house in Sedgenhoe Street, Woodbury, was the centre of the operation. 7 men and 3 women were arrested there today just after 11 this morning. Another 2 men from Madawi and 1 from Tomago were also arrested in the simultaneous raids. Police had been watching the alleged offenders since January under Strikeforce Islander.
We were targeting middle-level drug supply in the Lower Hunter area. The operation culminated today with the arrest of 13 people and the simultaneous execution of 6 search warrants at various addresses.
100 specialist police from several Lower Hunter and neighbouring area commands, as well as a dog squad, operational support group and state protection support unit were utilised in the raids. This house and its surrounds were this afternoon searched, police seizing drugs, cash and anything that could have been bought with drug money. It's alleged several of those arrested are related.
We think at this stage we've got a link to one family.
Police at the scene said the operation should help curb the supply of cannabis and methamphetamine in the area.
Any large-scale operation like this does have an impact.
Charges have yet to be laid. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It's a meeting both parties wish didn't have to take place, but club officials and clubhouse hotel licensees this morning discussed the embarrassing behaviour of players during Silly Sunday celebrations. Ian and Kylie Montgomery say a group of around 35 players wreaked havoc on their hotel on Sunday afternoon, and security footage of the hour-long ordeal has been passed on to the club.
Their behaviour was less than appreciated. It was a bit disgraceful and a bit arrogant, and it was a bit confronting for our bartender and a few other people that were in here.
It's alleged some of the players dropped their pants, others threw chairs and drinks, leaving a mess that took hours to clean up. As a result, the club has been banned from the premises for life. Those responsible are facing serious punishment. The club hasn't ruled out terminating contracts and issuing heavy fines.
The committee takes a very dim view of that. We had a meeting last night and we're going to explore every avenue, and the blokes that are in strife will be in strife.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News. Cutting spending by around $1.5 million seems just a drop in the ocean when compared to Council's $147 million annual revenue. And given a shortfall of $12 million for infrastructure maintenance each year, the Hunter Business Chamber believes the councillors and the General Manager haven't tightened the civic purse strings enough.
We wouldn't like to think that all of the savings are going to come from service cuts. We'd like to see the Janet Dorr as the General Manager really look at a restructure of the organisation as opposed to simply saying what services can we cut to the community.
Council has axed one senior staff position, with Janet Dorr today finding suggestions about the need for more redundancies hard to swallow.
It's not about job cuts, it's about programs and services. We've been asked to do too much by our community and state and federal governments shifting responsibilities onto us. That is the problem. So to talk about staff cuts is totally simplistic.
The General Manager today explained that the $1.5 million will come from reductions in some internal costs, including training, printing, stationery and catering, plus cuts to the pet microchipping scheme. She added that they'll continue to review all services to cut costs and raise more revenue. Councillors will make a decision on Tuesday night regarding the cost-saving package. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.